correctly, like the tabular sort of come up with a table, put it in some like text file in a wiki, Confluence, whatever, and then you cross-link to like some issue.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with that is you don't have, I guess, like, it says like the manual process.
Exactly. It's manual. There's no controls. Anybody can change it. And it's more for that use case is a visualization. It's not a management use case. It's like an after effect or tracking or a stakeholder watching your process use case.
So the difference would be that there's separate controls over who can edit this stuff.
Yes. So
that's the main issue. Like, well, that's one of the main issues, whereas like essentially everyone can edit issues, merge request, epics, whatever. Requirements management is like our boss coming in and saying, it must do these 5 things. Like, like you cannot change these 5 things, but you can say maybe add links and so like tell your boss by like adding the link and saying, oh, this thing is going to be met by like this epic over here.
So the permissions is related, but I would say that more of so permissions is part of control, right? So the control is less about who, and I think it's usually who, right? But I mean, in these big organizations, that's sort of like a given, but it's really like the timing, right? And like you set a project plan, and then the first month is about requirements, elicitation or gathering. So this is like sort of project management 101, old school, right? Requirements management, you elicit the requirements, you lock them down, and you cannot change them. And
so requirements management sort of covers like elements of project management as well.
Super related depending like who you talk to and like which website and which analyst, I guess. But like one's a subset of the other depending on the website pretty much, right?
Got it. Yeah, so as part of requirements management, depending on who you talk to, it might even include like Gantt charts and like project planning of like how you deliver those requirements, not just the definition and documentation of the requirements, but formalize. Like one of those requirements might include like delivery by X date, and therefore, consequently, like the scope of requirements management includes like delivery and reporting of how you're tracking to delivering the sub requirements to meet some delivery date requirement.
Exactly, and so because the word management, it's so broad and it's such a broad category, right? Like versus say like a requirements document or like a what is that called? A request for proposal based on these requirements, that, you know, that's a little bit more pared down and well, better defined usually. But then like what you said is, you could probably find a website that says requirements management encompasses all those things that you mentioned. I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Interesting. So your proposal is to somehow use a repository to track this. Right.
And it's what I'm attracted by is the versioning so that you have visibility and so which is a big deal in requirements, the versioning, and then you quote unquote get that for free. And also the merge request a little bit farther out, that has to be, you know, thought more, but there's and approvals, there's a concept of like change control there ultimately. So that's what is attractive to me, because I've been stuck thinking about requirements management for like past couple of months, and it doesn't fit well even with issues, as it were, because of all the things I mentioned in issue as well, but also just mainly that rigor is not there, and to invent it brand new seems like a waste. Like there's a part of GitLab that already has all that. And, you know, there's an industry that already has all that. It's called source control, right? So we should do that.
So yeah, interesting. I mean, one thing, like I'm pretty sure Confluence has, from when I remember using it, is like you can see diffs of each change, like it's versioned and tracked. So it's like a wiki. So
yep.
Sort of like change it and just commit to it essentially.
Yes.
And then you see like a nice markdown diff of like what changed.
Right, like Google Docs, that's essentially.
Yeah. So would the difference then be like, because I'm trying to think like, the difference might be like some sort of structures and UI templates for like designing these requirements that then either represented in text or like it can be edited directly in text.
Right.
But then there's like some merge request control process that like potentially you could have separate rules for merge requests that relate to the requirements repo versus the merge requests in the code.
I wasn't even thinking about that, but that could be like a great design. Like GitLab just knows your MR has these files, right? And then it displays it a little bit differently, something like that. But that could be a good way to do it. But like, yeah, even the wiki point to me is like, it almost is, it's like sort of like, let's debate that as we come up with better designs. It could be built on top of wikis. It doesn't have to be. And then, so to me, wikis are just a front end right now to a hidden repo in GitLab.
Yeah.
That's what they are, right? So
yeah.
Like a requirements management could be exactly that. It could be hidden. It doesn't need to be hidden. I don't.
The broader question I have is: does requirements management live in a project or somewhere else?
I thought about that a bit, and like, it doesn't matter because like you have your awesome design of like you just have a group point to a project. That's sort of like you've solved that with the template design, right? I think all the stuff that I'm working on should be group level anyways, in general, because like these are like, oh, we want to go after enterprise, and then like, things should be at the higher level.
So your requirements would still live in a repo somewhere. Like they would, because at the moment on the create side, we don't have repositories that live outside the project. So even group level wikis, we're proposing to make that sort of like shim that in by like
exactly
a project that has everything turned off except the wiki, and then you can like flag that so it sits at the top,
right?
Or project list so it's like starred or featured project, and it's the wiki.
Exactly. To me, that's like an implementation detail that you're solving, and then sort of we take advantage of that from a requirements management perspective. Like at the moment we say requirements management is using repos, then we sort of like ride on your coattails of however you want to solve that to do your group level use cases, and then we sort of build on top of that. At least that's how I think about it.
Yeah. I think I'm struggling to visualize what this might look like concretely.
Well, like, so the latest comment I put in the issue, I don't know if you saw it yet, is I'm considering reusing issues. And for issues, we've had this long discussion about, not a long discussion, but saying, should the descriptions be source controlled as well? So if the descriptions are source controlled, then why don't we just use an issue? And so I think I'm attracted to that particular idea, because either way you need a requirement object somehow. So if we don't use an issue and we just have a first-class citizen requirements object, and that seems to be what we're doing at GitLab nowadays, we have like a new first-class citizen object for every single thing, then for requirements management, we still need some object, because we can't just say a file is a requirement, because you do need a little bit more. You need things like you can have the title, you can have all text stuff in the file, but the moment you need to say link requirements, so that's traceability is the big thing.
Yeah.
Like this requirement satisfies this requirement, or these two requirements satisfy that requirement. This test case satisfies this requirement. We need to make those links, and you can't. Can you do that in Git? Maybe you can, but it's weird. It's a different type of linking, right? So that has to be done in GitLab somehow outside of the repo. So if we do that, and we want to be able to like classify requirements and possibly label them, why don't we just make them issues? So then sort of I sort of thought of, can we do the best of both worlds, where issue description is the source controlled piece, but the wrapper of how we do issue relationships and all those things, those would serve as the requirements traceability piece of RM. So that seems attractive to me as a framework to do this.
I've always wanted issues to be available via a Git interface.
Yeah, and so that, I mean, our templates are, right? It's almost silly that there's that non-parallel.
Yeah.
Right? If a template is a repo managed, then why isn't the actual content repo managed.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be interesting. There was like some performance concerns and stuff like that because you're reading to disk and stuff like that.
Yeah. It would, yeah, I think you would probably need to still store all the data in the database.
Right. At least the latest.
Performance reasons and things like that. But then the history could be stored elsewhere.
Exactly. To serve specifically, say, requirements management. Because if you read that long discussion in the issue I linked, the current design is you just show the diffs in the system feed, right? That like what we do for titles right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that for description too, and then you do not need to be repo backed. But there could be a great like Google Docs style feature where you want to see the entire old version. You click on it, and then it goes to Git and retrieves it, or from cache or wherever. So that could be interesting. Aside from requirements management, I wouldn't think that's a feature to justify using Git because that's not a compelling enough feature. But if you have requirements management needing a Git-backed issue description, then that opens up the possibilities of these, what I think lower priority features being nonetheless compelling.
One interesting thing you could do is if the Git-backed representation of an issue doesn't have to be human readable, you could have a text file for each issue and actually just store it as a JSON object and some representation.
Oh, interesting.
I've been thinking about this because I'm building a command line tool with an offline issue cache.
Okay.
That will currently the cache actually stores snapshots of the issue and it stores historic snapshots. So the idea being I'd run this on an hourly basis and get hourly snapshots of every issue. And then I could see the history, but then I think the interesting thing about that is that if you store it in some machine readable representation, it would open up the opportunity of storing a lot more data in. You could store the issue relations. They could just be like an array of issues in like a JSON object.
And that's what I need. That's what we need for requirements management, because the links you need to version that too and have possibly change control that as well.
Yeah. So I think that the challenge would be coming up with a format that doesn't change too quickly, because every time you change the representation, you actually have to like commit a change to every single object to update the format. And I think the other advantage of making it machine readable, besides people like me who want to build utilities on top of it, is customers themselves who want the traceability, and they will want machines to be reading this. Like they want audit logs to be in machine readable format so they can run it into their like security analysis tools. They probably want to be able to run these streams of commits into some analysis tool. So using an open format like JSON would probably that would work well.
Yep.
And you probably get pretty efficient diffing in the objects.
Right.
Like the compression in the pack files. It's interesting. I wonder if the main reason for Git is like that traceability, I wonder if it's not better to sort of find some first-class objects like issues and epics and see if we can like stick Git behind it and
Well, like the description and title to me are like the obvious candidates to start off with, and then but when we design it, make sure we have the discussions that you're having to make sure it's extensible to all the crazier ideas you're talking about now.
There are a lot of proposals to make issues available through Git notes.
What do you mean Git notes?
So there's Git has this notes feature that's not version controlled in the same way other objects are. Okay. So essentially you just get like the latest version. So the problem is it doesn't have good conflict resolution. So if you push and then I push, like we can just overwrite stuff. I think there's a range of problems around that, which I'm not describing well. But it's not versioned. But then there's a lot of tools out there that use Git notes so that you can have your issue tracker in the same repository as the code itself.
I see.
But if there was, say, GitLab CE dot issues or dot, like, I don't know, maybe issues isn't the right term, and it included all that, like issues, merge request descriptions, other kinds of requirements or whatever inside that repo.
Right.
Then that would be really, really interesting and sort of start opening up these use cases that a lot of people are very interested in, and it would solve your versioning history.
Right. That's interesting.
Traceability.
Yep. Oh, I mean, that part's definitely further out. I think just getting, if we were to be able to launch a feature called requirements, and you can create a requirement, you can version control it, and then you get all the linking for free because it's an issue, that would be super compelling already. And then an immediate use case would be probably approvals, but that's sort of already done, right? Because we have merge request approvals. And then the other use case would be like, people would say, like, you can link requirements to each other automatically, but I want that to be more controlled. I could see that be the next feature request. Go ahead.
Yeah, the challenge probably is merge requests work well when you're sort of looking at the source code and you're exposing underlying data structure. Like the engineers and the people that work with Git, when you expose the fact that it is Git, they understand that there is branching and merge requests.
Right.
I think the challenge comes when,
like, do you hide some of that UI? Do you wrap it a little bit?
Say, like, we want the interface to look more like issues,
right?
But have the traceability of Git and have the ability to propose a change, kind of like merge requests.
Right. The propose part is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like similar to maybe suggested changes. Like you make it's more like suggested changes.
Oh no, that's a good point. Yeah.
There's like a lightweight branching model that happens in the background, or a patch.
That's a really good point.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So rather than having a merge request, you treat it like a proposed patch or something.
Yeah, we'll just refactor your suggested changes feature, make it more generic, and then apply. You could, you could totally use that in the issue description, and that would be your change control, and you throw a little bit of permissions on top of it, and you're done. Yeah. So I didn't even think about that, and that could be. You don't even have to worry about merge requests, like you said, because there's branches and all that silliness going on.
Yeah,
that potentially business users wouldn't know about or care about.
Yeah, I mean, you could even restrict it and not allow pushes to other branches potentially, at least for simplicity in the first iteration. If you're primarily using it, or maybe you allow branches, but they just don't do anything.
Or no, like, I mean, just one. You can only commit to one thing, and then you have to reject it or before you propose a new one or something like that. So that can be done. That's interesting. I like that. Because that definitely simplifies it, and you definitely don't need branching for requirements as a use case. That's like a silly, it's one requirement. Somebody's going to propose changing it. You're not going to have 10 people proposing 10 different changes at the same time. So that's a great point about using it.
It might be worth not actually turning off branches in the repo itself.
Of course.
So people can still push them. They just don't do anything, have no purpose.
Like it's hidden directories, like nobody has to go to click the repository navigation if you don't want to, and you can tell them if they do, they would screw it up, right? It's their fault to do so, right? It's this type of thing.
Yeah. I think that'd be really interesting.
I'm excited because it finally gets Git to the real world. Something like this, that would be pretty compelling, because we use Git for for non-programming use cases at GitLab, but we're weird in that way. And then I've seen products in the marketplace where they do that for like editing and publishing, where it's sort of Git in the behind the scenes, and you sort of see a little bit of it. But if you think about it, nobody else in the world really uses Git. I guess people publish like papers and like scientific things sometimes using Git, but those are pretty technical people too. Right. But if you think about it, not a lot of people use Git in a really programming way. And if we're the first ones to pull it off, that would be pretty, because that's like supposedly our goal, what mission or whatever, right? To make all things in the world rewrite. And then if our name is GitLab, it would make sense that we use Git as that technology and not reinvent Google Docs versioning, because that's what we're doing right now with titles.
Yes.
So it would
it's one thing I've been thinking about the last week is one of the great features of Google Docs and a lot of other editors is like live editing. Like you're editing it live and you can see other people editing live. So imagine like we're having a meeting and we're working on an issue or working on requirements. We're both working on it in real time and we can see each other and collaborate. Like particularly as a remote company, we find that tremendously useful. But I think as you have more and more business people work on the documents, like the value of that is just so phenomenal. You can be working on different areas and you don't have conflicts. Like it's sort of just resolved. Like conflicts kind of disappear if it's just like,
that's a good point.
It's centralized versus distributed. The question that comes out of this is how do you reconcile that with a Git version control on the back? Like who commits what? When do you commit? Because
you lose some of the like if you look at the issue about issue description tracking, what people have proposed there, which I think makes some sense, is that you just lose granularity, right? You just say like you put a time period and say you just capture a version every X number of minutes or whatever. And so I think the proposal there was that like we were talking about earlier, like this data would still be saved in a database. So maybe the newest version is always saved in the database, but you take a snapshot and you commit it every X number of time, as opposed to committing it transactionally. So to me, that's an elegant. Isn't that what essentially Google Docs does anyways? Like it doesn't literally capture every single keystroke.
No, it doesn't.
Even though Google, I'm sure, is like powerful enough to implement that, but then that's essentially what they do. They're reinventing Git.
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, you're right. Like the technical challenge is like,
what's the optimal? Is it time-based? Is it transactional-based? Is it a combination of the two? It could be like there's enough changes to warrant a commit or something like that. Like it could be a combination of.
It's kind of, so I guess like let me play out a scenario. Like imagine we're like working on something together, and like I'm at the top of the document and you're at the bottom of the document, and we're like working in that area for like 5 or 10 minutes. So the question is like, at what time do we generate a commit? And who is the author of those commits?
Oh, I didn't even think about that authorship. That's a great one.
And like, what is useful to like rewind? Like, so like if we're in separate areas of the documents and then say we both end up in the middle and we're like typing beside each other, like I'm writing notes and you're fixing my typos, like, like we kind of have to design, like, I think the design challenge is actually designing some sort of system that sort of is storing keystroke time level data, and then is able to analyze it and then at some frequency says, oh, I'm going to take a snapshot and commit it. But you sort of, you don't really know when to commit until you've sort of like, you're past the point when you want to commit.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you want to get that crazy, you can do that analysis in real time, and have. Because
I would suggest that the moment we sort of then move into the center of the document, what should happen is the back end should say, I'm going to create a commit by James for the top bit, a commit by Victor at the bottom bit, and then like I'll just wait and see what happens in the middle, and like maybe I'll have like a commit that's co-authored by the two of them.
That's pretty cool.
Like, because like you want to actually create history that's useful, not just like snapshots. If we solve that, I mean, and build that into, like, because I mean, that's like the wiki feature that would suddenly make wikis like Google Docs.
Right. That's pretty compelling. Even for coding, even just for programmers who are pair programming. I don't know how like popular pair programming is. Yeah, or web IDE. Yeah.
It like, and maybe what the web IDE does is there's like this new pair programming thing, and it says, oh, based on your pair programming session, we're proposing these like 5 commits.
Oh, that would be amazing. Wow. Yeah.
But it would be the same logic. It would be like looking at like relevant areas of the document, who's worked on them.
That would be pretty cool. There's a lot of work to be done here.
If we solve that problem though of live editing, that is
There's so many applications that to me, that's what just pops out in the last 5 minutes throughout GitLab.
Yeah.
Like there's like 3 or 4 places that you could plug that into. If
yeah,
you're
live editing with the Git backend.
Yeah.
Like put it on issues, put it on wikis, put it on the web IDE.
Web IDE, just potentially anywhere there's a text box type of thing. Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I wonder how we build a proof of concept of this.
Well, the engineering folks were looking at technologies to do like real life live editing a year ago. I don't know if you
I spoke to Jakob about that at the time. Jacob, not Jakob. Getting my Jacobs confused. I spoke to Jacob Schatz about that at the time,
right.
And he demoed it. And
oh, cool.
I think he was using the transaction, like the transformation thing that Google
operational transforms.
Operational transforms.
I still remember that term. That means nothing to me, but like, oh, that's such a nice term, unique term, and so that's why I remember it.
Yeah, I just remember the crazy paper with the directed graphs that show how like
I was not aware of such. It's just documentation, or I was doing to dig in.
It sort of means that you can like be doing transforms, and if you apply them in different order, you guarantee you still get to the same endpoint.
Oh, that's what it's called, like operational transforms.
Because we both like you store things as like an operation, and like we both have different operations, and we can. I send mine to yours, and you send yours to mine, but I don't have to rewind mine then play yours. We just keep playing them forward, and eventually we'll converge to like the same point.
Some like eventual consistency.
Well, yeah. So I mean, like if we send them, we like you sort of have this diamond diagram. It's like I do this, and that thing. And then by replaying them, we both end up at the same point. And there's like a mathematical proof that you end up at the same point.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
But yeah, I think then the second point is like, besides sending that backwards and forwards and having a local editor, the server needs to be like storing that, analyzing it, guaranteeing that it's not losing it.
Right.
And then deciding when to commit it. And then once it commits it, it can drop those operations.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, we need to move on that soon. We'll get there.
Right. No,
we'll get there.
Categories is like a new category for this year, the live coding. But I think we should frame it around like the wiki and the web IDE, and also potentially snippets, and start working on not just the problem of like the infrastructure to get the transactions, the operations backwards and forwards, but also how do you convert that into Git history?
Right. Yeah, it should be solved together. I mean, we need to iterate, obviously, but it should be solved. Like at least the architecture should be considered together. I agree with that.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. Thanks for the chat. I hope that was some use to you.
Very much. I like the apply suggestions thing. That's like the greatest takeaway for me by far. By far, that's like. But I'm gonna. I'm glad I had sort of this epiphany last night, and I'm sort of getting a little bit more validation this morning, which is good. Always a good thing. And I'm gonna move forward like with just more tangible issues. I don't know when we're gonna work on this. But we are hiring more planned product managers. So if we're ramping up per like whatever board approved plan, then I'm excited that this will become reality sooner rather than later. And that I'll actually be excited about requirements management a little bit more than I was maybe like say 2 days ago. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Talk to you next time.
Chat.
Yep. Bye.